Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the MMA Pick'ems podcast, where we'll be breaking down UFC Fight Night, Vieira versus Tate. Not the best main event here, but, we do have, I think, a pretty solid card, a very prospect-heavy card. I mean, just going through it real quick, we have a lot of very young, fun prospects that, I'm very excited to watch. Guys like Sean Brady on here, Adrian Yanez, Taila Santos, Cody Durden, Terrance McKinney, Ziam, another really fun prospect fight. Tucker Lutz, Pat Sabatini, another good one. Luana Pinheiro's on here as well. Maybe not as hyped of a prospect, but I do think that, she's got a bit of potential. Loma versus Godinez, two very, exciting prospects as well. So this could be one of those cards we look back on in a couple of years and think, wow, those guys were all on the same card. But probably not. I'm just trying to be positive here. Anyways, I do think these guys have a lot of potential. So I do think that guys like, Brady and Yanez will definitely bring it. They're very exciting fighters to watch. But overall, I honestly do feel this could be a very good card. A lot of young guys here who probably want to make a name for themselves, want to get that bonus as well. So could potentially be just a very exciting card, front to back. And as you guys may have noticed already, this is releasing a little early, so no recap yet. Believe the fights are probably going to be going on as this gets dropped, and the reason for that is I'm just going to be out of town this weekend. Going to go on a little vacation here, so I'm going to get this out early instead of later. So no recap since obviously none of the fights have happened yet. But just want to get this content out of here before before I go on my little break here. So without further ado, let's just get right into this card here. If anyone's interested, I might do the breakdown for the previous card. If people are interested, I'll just do that separately, maybe upload it on Monday or something, or Tuesday. So yeah, just let me know. And with that, we'll just get right into the full card here. And in the first fight of the night, we have Luana Pinheiro versus Sam Hughes. And I do believe this fight was put in on short notice. Pinheiro originally scheduled to fight Penne. Penne withdrew, and Sam Hughes is going to be stepping in now. There are no odds on this fight just yet, so I'll give my odds for it in a bit after I do the breakdown here. But taking a look at both fighters, we'll start with Sam Hughes first. So Sam Hughes, not a super high-level striker. She's very tough, very durable, and is someone who will move forward. But, as far as her striking, I don't think she's, really all that great there. She's got a decent jab. She will look to, pressure opponents, back them down, and look for that overhand. She will mix in some kicks as well. Overall, she's a very tough fighter in there who will look to move forward and just throw volume. So, while I don't think she's super high level, I do think that these attributes can get you pretty far in women's MMA. I know she's only 5-3, but she's 0-2 in the UFC. Those losses being to Tecia Torres, who, she's a solid ranked fighter and a very tough debut to go up against. And then Loma Lookboonmee, who's also on this card, but Loma, very high level Muay Thai striker as well. So another very tough fight for Sam Hughes. So. I do think that against some of these lesser fighters, she'll have a lot more success. She just happened to get matched up against one of the better strikers in the division. But going back to Hughes here, I do think that, just being as tough as she is, she's going to be a bit of a problem for a decent amount of fighters. And she does have a little bit of grappling she can go to, but overall, I think she's just someone who will look to just move forward and look to do damage. But that said, though, Hughes is someone who is pretty hittable. She's taken just so much damage over the last couple of fights, and that's definitely going to be a concern going into this fight. She's going up against Pinheiro, who I think is a pretty good offensive striker. Pinheiro definitely is someone who could crack. She's got a nice leg kicking game, a nice side kick, jab, 1-2. She's got good feints in there. Definitely seems to have a bit of pop in her shots. She's got good footwork in there as well. Overall, she's looked pretty good offensively, honestly. But, she's been fighting some pretty low-level fighters, which might not mean too much here since Sam Hughes is pretty low-level as well. So, Pinheiro might be able to get her out of there, especially with how hittable Hughes is. But, another concern that I do have with Pinheiro is the fact that, she's got a lot of early finishes, so we really don't know how she's going to look extended. I was kind of hoping to see how that would look against Marcos in their most recent fight. And, Pinheiro was actually looking pretty good early, before taking that up kick. I don't know if she really needed to milk it like that. I think that should the fight have gone on, she probably could have won, but, I guess she just wanted the easy dub there, so, can't hate her too much for that, but I would like to have seen a little more coming from her. That said, though, she did look, I'd say pretty good up until that up kick. So Pinheiro, I do feel, should win this. I think that she should be able to do a bit of damage on Hughes in that first round. But, outside of that first round is where it gets a little dicey. Just we have no idea really how Pinheiro is going to look. And, if she blows her load in that first round and isn't able to get Hughes out of there, Hughes might be able to, start to turn the tides a bit coming into that second and third round. Hughes, like I said before, very tough, very durable, and is someone who will keep moving forward. Hughes was actually able to take a round off of Loma in that fight, and I feel that if Hughes was a little more aggressive going into that second round, she might have possibly been able to steal one of the second round as well. So I definitely do think that Hughes is live here, so I wouldn't make Pinheiro that big of a favorite. I do feel that, should this fight get extended, it could get a little dicey, and I do think that Hughes should be able to survive here. So, as far as how I would line the fight, I'd probably line Pinheiro at like minus 170 or so, roughly, because I do think that first round is going to be very strong for Pinheiro. She might actually have enough in the tank to win that second round as well, definitely. But, it really just depends on how hard Pinheiro is growing in that first round. So, a lot of factors here, but I do feel that Pinheiro might be able to get that first round finish, or at least banked in 2 rounds and win the fight that way. So, I'm going to go with Pinheiro to win via decision here. Hughes, pretty tough. Don't know if she'll get the finish. But, again, with how hittable Hughes is, I wouldn't be surprised if Pinheiro just found a head kick or something. So, I'll go with Pinheiro here. I don't think she should be like a massive favorite because I do think she's relatively unproven. And going up against someone like Hughes, who is really tough, really durable, and is always game. Definitely going to be a little concerning there, but I do think that Pinheiro should get it done. I believe she is the better striker, and the only concern really is just the cardio and how she's going to look when she's extended. So I'll take Pinheiro here to win via decision. And in the next fight, we have Shayilan Nuerdanbieke versus Soriano. So Soriano is going to be the minus 240 favorite. Comeback on Nuerdanbieke is plus 205. And we'll start with Nuerdanbieke. I'm just going to call him Sha from now on, a little easier. Not too much tape on him. And from what I've seen, it's kind of hard to see what he really does well. Looks like on the feet, he is a little low volume, appears to primarily be a counter striker. But, I think he's kind of slow in there. He kind of winds up quite a bit. So it's a little easy to read him. He does seem to have a bit of power. That said, though, he is kind of slow, and I just don't know if he's going to be landing too hard on some of the fighters that are UFC caliber. I've also seen him look to hit some wrestling a little bit. In his fight against Qileng, his UFC debut, he resorted to a bit of wall install. So, in that first round at least, wasn't having too much success with it in the latter rounds. So I suspect his cardio might be a bit of an issue as well, because, after that first round of grappling, he wasn't able to go to it very well at all, and Qileng was able to kind of just shuck him off in the second and third round and just kind of tee off on him on the feet. So I'm not really sold on Sha whatsoever. I don't think he's a great striker, and I don't really think he's a good grappler either. His cardio is definitely a bit suspect, and I do think his chin is a little weak as well. He's been knocked out on the regionals, on the Chinese regionals, which definitely not a good look. And I do feel that Qileng was kind of hurting him a little bit. He wasn't rocked or, wobbled or anything at any point, but it does look like that Sha doesn't really respond well to getting hit, which is why I think he was looking so hard to just wall install, get the fight into a control position. So Qileng's not just piecing him up at distance here. So overall, just not very impressed with him, not very high on him whatsoever. I really don't think he's UFC caliber. And he'll be going up against Soriano, who, might be in a similar situation, but I do think that Soriano's faced the higher level of competition, and I do think that Soriano's just a little bit better than Sha here. So, taking a look at what Soriano does, he's primarily a striker. I think he's got some pretty heavy hands. He looks to load up big in there. He's very heavy-handed, definitely dangerous on the feet. Where he has struggled the most historically has been his defensive grappling. His takedown defense is pretty awful, and his submission defense is pretty bad as well. I think Most of his losses are via submission or ground and pound. So, if you get this guy to the ground, you could potentially get the finish here. And so, yeah, on the feet, I definitely do favor Soriano. He definitely looks like the better striker in there. I think he's got the heavier hands. Shaw might be able to catch Soriano with like a counter shot or something, but I'm really doubting it. Shaw's got, just pretty bad reaction time, if I'm being honest. And I do think that Soriano's got a pretty good chance of clipping Shaw early, potentially getting him out of there. Shaw's been hurt on the regionals. Soriano's got big power, so I do think that's a very live outcome. But, I don't know if I want to be laying the minus 240 on Soriano here, especially given the fact that Shaw does seem to look to attack the wrestling, go to the grappling a bit. And, if Soriano isn't able to get Shaw out of there early, Shaw might have a bit of grappling success. I really don't think Shaw's that good, though. So, Soriano might be able to stuff the takedowns here. I don't know if Shaw's, at the level of these other regional fighters that have been able to take Soriano down and either pound him out or submit him. So while Shaw on paper might look like a tough stylistic matchup for Soriano here, I just don't know if Shaw is really on that level to take advantage. And personally, I'm leaning towards no. I don't think Shaw's quite on that level, but I'm not exactly about to pay to find out here. But as far as an official pick goes, I'm going to go with Soriano. I think he should be able to get it done in the first round here. I think he should be able to knock out Shaw. But, if he isn't able to, the fight definitely can get a little dicey. Soriano is someone who has shown he will slow down and, get finished later in the fight if he doesn't get that early finish. So I'll take Soriano in the first round here, but, I don't have much faith in him, at least at minus 240. So likely pass on this fight, but official prediction is Soriano by first round knockout. And in the next fight, we have Cody Durden versus Aori Qileng, supposedly. At least that's what I heard from the commentators. I'm going to call him Ori. This is a minus 110 pick'em, so, line very closely here. But we'll take a look at Durden first. Durden, he's primarily a wrestler. I think his striking is a bit subpar. It's not terrible per se, but, he is someone who is a little wild on the feet. He's got very heavy leg kicks. He's got very wild punches overall, a little loopy in there, but it does look like he generates a bit of power. Looks like he, mainly is just looking to throw those, just bombs in there to close the distance, get it on the hips of his opponents. It looked like it improved a little bit against Flick, but, I do have to say Flick is primarily a grappler as well, so not a performance we could take too much from as far as like the striking goes. But again, Durden, he is primarily a wrestler. He will look to, get in on his opponent's hips. He's very explosive with his takedowns. And, on top, he's got decent ground and pound, and he's got a pretty solid submission game as well. So on the ground, definitely where he favors it, where he's most comfortable, and generally where he does his best work. He is pretty aggressive down there, almost to a fault, I'd say. He could maybe get his opponents out of there, but if he doesn't, I have seen him, posture up, give him his opponents a little too much space to work with, lose position. And, I've also seen him slow down a bit as the fight progresses. So not really sure how well his cardio is going to hold up, if he's going to be able to grapple for extended periods of time. Because, we did see him, I believe he made a short notice debut in the UFC against Gutierrez, where he was able to take the back of Gutierrez, but outside of that first round, did not really have much wrestling success. And he's got a ton of fights on the regionals that ends really early, so we don't really know how he's going to look when he gets extended. We don't know if that wrestling-heavy game plan is going to look good going late in that second and third round. That said, though, from what I've seen so far, he does look to be, pretty aggressive with his wrestling, and he is pretty proficient there. His opponent, Ori, very limited tape, even before going into the UFC, there was really hard finding tape on this guy. But, based off of that one fight we did see on him, in his UFC debut, the guy looks like, he's very tough in there. He's got a lot of heart. We'll look to move forward, very heavy-handed. Shows that, he could wrestle a bit as well. So he's definitely shown, he's somewhat well-rounded. Definitely one of the more promising prospects coming out of that Shanghai PI. But But yeah, I mean, the guy's a dog in there. Showed a lot of toughness. Went to war with Molina in his most recent fight. And as it turns out, Molina looking like a pretty decent prospect himself. So I do think that Aori gave a pretty good account of himself. But, taking a look at this matchup, I do think that he's a little outgunned on the ground. I think that on the feet, Aori might be a little better, in terms of the striking, maybe in terms of the power he brings. But I don't know if he'll have much in regards to the grappling attack that Durden's going to bring. I do think that Durden's going to be able to take Aori down, maybe pound him out early. I don't know if he will be able to. Aori's shown really good toughness. He might be able to find the sub, but Durden I don't think is a high-level submission artist. He does have a number of submissions on his record, but I don't think he's like a big submission artist. So I think Durden's best path to victory here is maybe just getting a ground and pound finish, or just grinding out maybe 2 of the 3 rounds. That third round might get a little dicey. We haven't seen Durden go to decision too much, so that's a big question mark there. But I do think that Durden is the side here. I think he's likely fought high level of competition here in the States. I really don't rate the Chinese regional scene very well whatsoever. So I'm going to have to go with the wrestler in Durden here. I think he should have enough in the tank to bank at least 2 rounds, or potentially get the finish with the ground and pound. So I'm going to go with Durden here at Pick'em. I think there might be a little value on him. I might actually put maybe a unit sprinkle on Durden here. I think that, with the wrestling, there could be quite a bit of upside. He could look like a slight to moderate favorite, assuming he doesn't just drop the ball in that third round. So, I'm going to go with Durden. I think he should be able to grind out a decision here, and I do feel he's got some finishing upside as well. And in the next fight, we have Terrance McKinney versus Faraz Ziam, and this is a pick'em fight, -110 both ways. We'll take a look at McKinney first. Very fun, very exciting fighter to watch. Had a lot of fun doing tape on him. His fights usually only go about like 20 seconds or so. So, didn't have to spend too much time watching this guy. He's very dangerous in there. He's got a lot of pop in his shots. He's a bit wild on the feet, honestly. He will just kind of lower his head and just start chucking bombs in there. Very much kill or be killed. Very much a glass cannon, I'd say. He could definitely put you out with his power. And, he does have pretty explosive wrestling as well. He could take you down, just slam you, and just very heavy-handed, even on the ground. So, the guy's a finisher through and through. But, I do think he's got some durability concerns, though. I think he's been finished in all of his losses, all in pretty devastating fashion. So, I do think he's someone who, very much kill or be killed, literally the definition of someone like that. So, with McKinney, I think, he's always live to start you early, take you down, just pound you out, or, just get taken out himself. So, there's, I think, not much else to say about McKinney. Pretty straightforward here. Ziam, a very, very good striker, good kickboxer. He's a very tall, lanky guy in there. Does a decent job of maintaining the range. Does a good job of feinting. He's got decent footwork. Does a good job of pumping the jab out well. Just touching you with the kicks. The only issue on the feet that I have with the Ziam is he's definitely a bit low volume. He's really just throwing feints in there, just giving his opponent multiple looks. But when it comes to actually throwing and doing stuff in there, he's not super high volume. I don't think he's got super effective striking. And, he does struggle with the grappling. He is someone who has been held against the cage for extended periods. He is someone who, if you take him down, he's kind of stuck on his back. So, very big hole in his grappling, defensive grappling in that sense. We saw Don Madge pretty much hold him up against the cage for like 13 plus minutes. We saw Vendramin, take him down late in the third round and just kind of pound him out. We saw Malarkey have a lot of success with the wrestling as well. So, Ziam, I do think, is someone who could definitely be controlled. And, with how good of a kickboxer he is on the feet, I can definitely understand why opponents are looking to just mitigate that, get the wrestling going and, just take away his striking. And for this matchup, I do feel that McKinney's definitely the guy that can take advantage of that. McKinney, I think, is a very explosive wrestler. He's got very good takedowns, and on top, he's very aggressive. It's definitely troubling seeing Vendramin on top of Ziam, just, laying hammer fists on him from top. So, if Vendramini is able to do that, I definitely think a strong power wrestler like McKinney, who's got very heavy hands, can, do the same to Ziam, just take him down, just rain hammer fists on him. That's, I think, very live. I don't know if McKinney's going to be taking Ziam out on the feet. Ziam, I think, is the far better striker. And if McKinney just comes forward and strikes like he does against Ziam, I could definitely see Ziam clipping and catching McKinney as well. So that's, I think, a live outcome here. But, if I'm McKinney here, I'm probably just going to look to take Ziam down and just look to smash him, honestly. However, the big question here with McKinney, even though he's very explosive and has a ton of finishing upside, is going to be the cardio. I don't think he's had any fight go past the 7.5 minute mark. So, if he's able to take Ziam down and not finish him in that first round, I have no idea how he's going to look. The only fight that went to the second round with McKinney was his fight against Woodson, where, he had a little bit of grappling success early, but, Woodson was able to get up and then just land a flying knee on him and pretty much end him there, which brings me to my next point on McKinney. The guy, I think, is low-key probably kind of fragile. I know he's got a number of finish losses, one where I believe he suffered a broken leg, and then the other one, a flying knee, and then a triangle choke. So, you could say these are kind of fluky, but I think that for these things to happen, you have to be, a certain level of fragile. So, yeah, I mean, the guy, I believe, blew out his knee celebrating in his last fight. So, the guy's joints or fucking limbs or something is, probably not the best. I don't think his durability's super good. So, yeah, definitely a bit of a concern here going into this fight. Not sure how he'll look extended and not sure how his durability will hold up. So I'm still going to go with McKinney here. I think there is a pretty decent path to victory. I think that, honestly, if McKinney kind of tightens his game up a little bit, he can have a lot of success. We saw Ziam get controlled by, lesser wrestlers, lesser grapplers. So I think that if McKinney is able to take Ziam down and not just blow his load, if he focuses a little more on just the control, I do think that he could probably bank 2 rounds. But, I don't know if McKinney's the type of fighter to do that. He's all action so far. So, usually the look with McKinney is probably just the under 1.5. It might be pretty juiced. The guy is either going to look to get his opponents out of there or he's going to get finished. But I do have to mention McKinney is still pretty young in his career. I think that, I wouldn't lay the juice on him, going balls to the wall early. That definitely is a live outcome, but, I think he's still young enough in his career that he could make that improvement, right? I think with a proper corner, a proper game plan, he could definitely, approach this fight in a much smarter manner, a much more methodical manner. So I'm going to go with McKinney here. I think he could potentially get a stoppage, but with a good game plan, I do think he could grind out a decision as well. So I'm going to go with McKinney in this spot. And in the next fight, we have Loma Lookboonmee versus Lupita Godinez, and Godinez is the minus 145 favorite. Comeback on Loma is plus 125, and I believe this fight is on short notice for Godinez here. Loma's original opponent dropped out, and Godinez is going to be coming in short notice to fight Loma. So honestly, not really sure if I like that on Godinez's end. She's very early, very young in her career, and I don't know if you want to be taking too many of these short notice fights without getting a full camp and everything, especially against Loma, who's a really solid Muay Thai striker. But just taking a look at this fight real quick, Loma, she's got that Muay Thai base, very high level there. She's got some very vicious kicks, likes to dig to the body and just chop at the legs. And then, of course, she's got, very nasty clinch knees and elbows in there. She's extremely vicious with the way she throws, definitely throws with intent, looking to do a bit of damage. None of that pitter-patter stuff from Loma. She's got decent takedown defense, but the issue with her is she's a bit undersized. She's definitely been bullied in there against bigger, stronger fighters. Even fighters like Fry and Hughes were able to have a bit of success, pinning Loma up against the cage, getting a little bit of top time on her. these are fighters that I actually don't think are on Loma's level, but, since they're a bit bigger, a bit more physical, they are able to have a bit of grappling success. And really, that's always going to be the concern here with Loma. I do think that skill-wise, she's going to be a lot better than a lot of her competition, but, the fact that she's so undersized kind of leaves a lot of openings for her to just get a little, just bullied in there, honestly. But outside of that, she's got great offensive striking, and, she's just extremely scrappy in there. She hits hard, and even when you're holding her up against the cage, or if you're taking her down, she does look to get up as soon as possible. She doesn't just accept bottom position or accept being held up against the cage. And she'll be going up against Godinez, like I said before, coming in short notice. A little questionable in terms of accepting this fight. She's 1-2 in the UFC. Definitely have to pick her spots a little better. Don't want to flame out before you've really gotten a chance. But going back to Godinez here, what she brings to the table, she's, she kind of looks to be primarily a striker, but, she has gone to her grappling a bit recently. That said, though, on the feet, she is a little plotty, but she is someone who will move forward and chuck bombs in there. She looks like she hits hard in there, but I don't know if she's really knocked anyone out. And, she is someone who I would classify as a bit of a volume striker, even though it looks like she hits hard. So, kind of a weird dynamic there. And on top of that, she does seem to have a bit of wrestling, a bit of grappling to go to. We just saw her go in there and submit her second most recent opponent, Silvana Gomez Juarez. She was able to take her down, submit her. And she does actually, or Godinez does actually have another submission on the record. So it does look like Godinez is someone who is comfortable, with the grappling exchanges, and is someone who will look to go to the wrestling if she feels like she's got an advantage there, like she did against Carolina. Carolina, much bigger fighter in there. Godinez wasn't able to have much success outside of that first round. When it came to the wall install, the size difference was just way too big in there. And, Godinez definitely was struggling a bit with the size of Carolina. But, that said, I do think that Godinez does look like a pretty well-rounded fighter who is, pretty scrappy on the feet and is able to mix in the wrestling if she wants to. But taking a look at this matchup, I do feel it's a pretty tough matchup for Godinez to come into, especially on short notice. I don't know if she should be the favorite here. I think this fight should probably be at a pick'em, if not, just outright Loma being the favorite here. I think that Loma's the much more technical striker. I think she's just overall the much better striker. Really, I think for Godinez to win, she'll have to rely heavily on her wrestling here. She's going to have to get a ton of control time, either up against the cage or maybe even just look to take Loma down and get control time and work the ground and pound, maybe find the submission. But on the feet, I do think that Loma should have the advantage. But Godinez can definitely kind of even it up a bit with the grappling. But as far as a pick goes, I am going to pick Loma to win via decision here. I think that the judges like her striking quite a bit. She throws pretty heavy in there, and Godinez is pretty hittable. I think that, when it's on the feet, there's going to be some back and forth moments, but overall, I do think that Loma's going to be having the much bigger moments, the much more eye-catching moments, and Loma's got a very nasty clinch game as well. So I do think that overall on the feet, I see Loma landing just the much more damaging shots. I think where it's really going to get dicey is, of course, going to be in the grappling situations. Like I said before, Loma has been controlled, against the cage. She has been taken down before as well. And Godinez, that is something that's a part of her game. But the issue is, I don't know if she's going to be able to go to it for all 3 rounds. I don't know if she's going to be able to go to it enough to overcome the difference on the feet in terms of the striking. So I got to go with Loma here, especially at dog odds. I do think that over the course of 3 rounds, she could definitely, rack up enough damage on the feet to win 2 of those rounds. And, we saw with Godinez, she had one good round of grappling against Carolina, and after that point did not really have too much success there. I don't know if, the fact that fight was short notice, she was making a 1 week turnaround on top of the fact that, Carolina much bigger, and Godinez maybe, tired herself out a little bit after that first round. Not sure if that's going to happen again in this fight. She is coming in short notice, but, she's going to be fighting a much smaller opponent in Loma. So I don't know if that's going to happen again, but I do feel that Loma will really make Godinez work in those grappling exchanges. So I'll go with Loma here to get the decision victory. I don't think she's gonna knock Godinez out. Godinez, extremely durable. So I just feel that if Loma's gonna win, it's gonna be via a very, very close decision. And in the next fight, we have Natan, Levy versus Rafa, García. And right now, this fight is sitting at a pick'em -110 both ways. We'll take a look at Levy first. So Levy, he is going to be making his UFC debut here. He is primarily a grappler. His stand-up is not that great, honestly. He's extremely hittable there, at least from what I have seen. He is someone who is kind of wild and will kind of just throw bombs in there and look to close the distance with the striking. But like I said before, he is primarily a grappler. And he is pretty consistent with his grappling. He is someone who will go to it. He's not going to look to play around on the feet for too long. But as far as his grappling, I think it's decent. Definitely looks a little unpolished there. I do feel he is prone to losing position when he's, on top of his opponents. Sometimes he maybe gets a little over aggressive there and leaves openings for his opponents to either reverse him or just work their way back up. That said, though, he does commit pretty hard to it. So, even if his opponents get up, he will look to get them back to the ground, as soon as he can. But, overall, I do think he's a decent grappler, considering he's only got 6 professional fights. He has got a decent submission game as well. Just overall, I'd say he's still pretty green. And lastly, I do want to add that I just don't think his chin is the best. He's never been knocked out, but, I have seen him hurt and I have seen him wobbled in there. But he has shown decent recoverability, and, we'll look to get his grappling going, going on the single as soon as, he gets hurt. So just a little concerning here, especially considering that, he is kind of hittable. So, once he starts facing better opponents, I do feel that he might struggle a bit unless he really shores up his striking defense or, looks to get his grappling going much sooner than that. So, I do feel that might be a bit of a concern here because he's going up against Rafa García, who, I really don't think Rafa García is any good. He definitely burned me a bit in his last fight. But, as far as what García brings to the table here, he is someone who will move forward. He is very tough. He is someone who's got a bit of power. So Levy definitely going to have to watch out for that. But, outside of that, I really don't think that García is really any good. I definitely gave him a little too much credit for surviving his fight against Hakparast. And, at the end of the day, the guy just got pieced up for 3 rounds, right? He was just a punching bag. And I guess I gave him a little too much for credit for that going into the Gritsmacher fight, thinking, if, he could survive those rounds with Hakparast, he'll likely just be able to move forward, pressure Gritsmacher a bit, and, just look to win either on a volume-based decision or maybe even just get Gritsmacher out of there. But it looks like García just gassed himself out early in that fight, looking for the finish, and Gritsmacher was able to just kind of grind his way to a victory in the second and third round. So, just a very bad look on Garcia's end. Like, there's no way I could pick this guy after that sort of performance against the likes of someone like Chris Gritsmacher. I think that if you lose to Gritsmacher, you're just not UFC caliber. So I'm going to have to side with Levy here just by default. Levy definitely, very unproven, very raw in there still, but, he does fight to his strengths well. I think he is someone who will, he will fight, his game plan. He's going to go in there. He's going to look to get takedowns. He's going to look to get top control time and look to just make the fight really grindy and make it really dirty in there. So I do think that's a very legit path to victory. The concern is, if García is just going to spark him early. But, I don't think that García really is that heavy of a hitter. I do think that García is actually kind of undersized for the division. I think he's naturally, or at least, he's got the frame of a featherweight. So, Levy's, I think, a legit, lightweight. And I do believe Levy actually, either he missed weight. I think it actually might have been a catchweight fight. Never mind. So, Levy's, I think, a massive lightweight here. So I do think that, should it get into the grappling exchanges, he might be able to kind of just bully García in there a little bit. García is definitely a little stocky in there. And it doesn't even look like Garcia's got phenomenal cardio either. So I don't think that, he'll be able to just kind of weather the storm of Levy early and then look to just pour it on him late. I feel that if Levy is able to get his grappling going, García will start to slow down as well. And this will get this will turn into a pretty sloppy sort of fight. So I'm going to go with Levy here. I do think that he should be able to bank 2 rounds at least with his grappling. Obviously the concern is, might get clipped by Garcia and just get put out early, but I do feel that the longer this fight goes, the more it will favor Levy. I do think that, once he starts draining the gas tank of Garcia a little bit, Garcia's not going to have too much left to offer him, and I do think that Levy should be able to get enough control time to win at least 2 rounds here. So I'm going to go with Levy here, and I do think he wins via decision. And moving right along, we have Tucker Lutz versus Pat Sabatini, and Sabatini's the -150 favorite. Comeback on Lutz is +130. So we'll start with the underdog in Lutz first. The guy is primarily a wrestler. His striking is serviceable, nothing great. He's a bit flat-footed. Does seem a little hittable, but he does seem to have, pretty heavy hands offensively, and does look like he is able to put combinations together pretty well. Overall, a little clunky and a little hittable, but outside of that, I don't think his striking is too bad. But like I said before, he will generally look to wrestle. He's a bit of a grinder in there. He is someone who will look to take his opponents down, lay the ground and pound, and kind of work a bit of that control time. He was on Dana White's Contender Series twice. Didn't look particularly impressive in there, but he was able to get the job done both times. He's not the flashiest fighter in there, but he does fight to his strength. His cardio is solid, so he's able to wrestle pretty well for 3 rounds. And, he just fights to his strength well. He knows what it takes to win. And he has been getting the job done with his wrestling. And he'll be going up against a pretty solid prospect in Sabatini, who I would consider a submission specialist. And on the feet, he's decent there. He's got lots of good movement, good feints. We'll look to throw spinning attacks in there. It does look like he may go to the well with that a little too much with the spinning attacks. But, he is, again, someone who will generally look to either get the fight up against the cage or onto the ground. He will look to wall install a bit. But, once he is able to get opponents down to the ground, he is rather aggressive with his submissions. He's not the busiest with the ground and pound, but, I think he usually just throws that, to either keep busy or maybe just create openings. And then, he's got very good jiu-jitsu, obviously. He's, I think, a really high-level submission grappler. However, with that said, though, I don't think his wrestling is particularly great. So getting the fight to the ground might be a little problematic here in this spot. This should be a pretty interesting matchup because on the feet, I do think it's going to be pretty close. I don't think either guy has phenomenal striking or anything, but it is very serviceable, and I do think, it should be pretty back and forth. I don't think we're going to have a very clear-cut winner in regards to the striking. But I do think the wrestling is where it gets, really intriguing here because, I do think Lutz is the better wrestler, but I do favor Sabatini, in regards to the jiu-jitsu. I do think Sabatini is the better submission grappler. So it'll be interesting to see if Lutz wants to take this fight to the ground. But I do think it'll come down to, whether or not he's comfortable enough on the feet or if he feels like he's winning enough on the feet to look to attack the wrestling here. But that said, I do think that Sabatini will struggle a little more getting this fight to the ground if he wants to. I think that Lutz will probably be the one dictating whether or not the fight goes to the ground. Obviously, unless Sabatini is able to hurt Lutz or something on the feet and Lutz decides to just shoot in on a double. But, generally speaking, I do think that Lutz will be the one kind of dictating where the fight goes. That said, though, I do think that, if Lutz is smart with his takedowns, I believe he may be able to get a bit of top control time, stay safe, not, give too much space for Sabatini to work with on the ground here. And I do think that if Lutz is able to mix in the takedowns at opportune times, he could very well steal rounds because I do think that the striking should be pretty close. So for that reason, I am going to pick Lutz here to pull off the upset. Again, assuming the striking exchanges come out pretty even, I think that Lutz can replicate a similar game plan that he had against Aguilar where he was able to pretty much just close out the rounds, with his wrestling on top. So I think that really would sway the scoring in his favor. So, kind of just look to box with Sabatini for a bit, 3.5 minutes or so. And then near the end of the round, just shoot a takedown, accumulate control time. Maybe don't even worry too much about the ground and pound. Don't give Sabatini, any space in there to find a submission. Don't let him snatch up in a neck or a limb or something. So I think that would be the path to victory here for Lutz. That said, though, Sabatini, he might be able to hit some takedowns. He might be able to catch Lutz on the feet. Or he might just be able to catch Lutz in a submission if this fight does hit the ground. So, Sabatini, I think, is a pretty legit grappler, but I do feel that Sabatini is largely sub or bust in the spot. I don't know if he'll have too much success holding Lutz against the cage. I don't know if he'll have too much wrestling success. So, yeah, I feel that outside of, just a submission, it's going to be hard for Sabatini to win the decision here. So, I'm going to go with Lutz here. I think Lutz gets it done via decision. He's going to be able to get his boxing going a little bit and then mix in the wrestling at good times to seal the rounds that way. So I'll take Lutz here, and I'll take him via decision. And moving right along, we have Adrian Yanez versus Davey Grant. And Yanez is the minus 240 favorite. Comeback on Grant is plus 205. So we'll take a look at Yanez first. Yanez, very young, very exciting prospect. He's got very good crisp striking, very calm and composed in there. He's got great counterpunching. He's got great accuracy and timing. Just a very slick striker overall. He's shown tremendous durability as well. He's shown really good heart in there. We saw that on full display in his most recent fight against Rani Costa, where he was getting pieced up early in that fight. He was getting all bloodied up. And, I did have a bet in Yanez in that fight, and I was definitely sweating it. But, Yanez was able to hang tough in there and make the adjustments, which, very good look on his end, and eventually turn it around in the second round. So really good to see that, he was able to fight through a bit of adversity and also make the adjustments, in between rounds as well. So I really like Yanez in this spot. I think he's got a lot of potential. I think that he's a very dangerous striker as well. And he'll be going up against Davey Grant, who, is getting a little older. I wouldn't say he's a veteran at this point, but, he has gotten a few fights under his belt at the UFC level. I do think he's one of these guys who kind of got a little later start in MMA, but, he's a very solid, well-rounded fighter. He's got good striking. He moves pretty well on the feet. Does a pretty good job of mixing it up, with the kicks and some of his striking as well. He was on a nice little knockout streak. The guy does generate some power with his hands. That said, though, I'm not completely sold on him being a knockout artist. I do think he was able to catch Day and Martinez pretty clean there. So I'm not sure if this is going to happen in this fight, although, he has shown he could definitely crack. So I wouldn't be completely surprised, but, he'd have to kind of catch Yanez here, which, I don't think is too likely. But, on top of that, Grant, he does have a bit of wrestling he could go to as well. Hasn't been going to that much lately. It does look like he's kind of fallen in love with his hands a little bit. He did go to the wrestling a little bit against Vieira in his most recent fight, but I just don't think at this stage in his career he's going to be able to do it effectively over the course of 3 rounds. It's probably something he can mix in, at the end of rounds or something to maybe kind of, steal the round in the judge's eyes, but I just don't think he could look to wrestle heavy for 10 plus minutes every fight. But taking a look at this matchup, I definitely do have to favor Yanez on the feet. He's much younger. I think he's a little more athletic in there. I think his striking is just much slicker. I think his timing is a little better. And, with Grant, while I do think he's got good movement on the feet, and, we did see Yanez struggle a little bit with the feints and the head movement that Costa brought, but I don't think that Grant is quite at that level. And I just think that even though Grant, he's a solid striker, I do think his striking is a little repetitive. I do think that Yanez could probably find the read on Grant and eventually time him, potentially knock him out. Grant has shown to be pretty durable, but he has been hurt, he has been dropped, and he has been wobbled a few times in the UFC. So I do think that once Yanez is able to get his timing down, I do think that he should be able to put Grant down. That said, though, I think up until then, it could look like a pretty close fight. Grant, he has got decent volume, and he is somewhat aggressive in there. So, if Yanez isn't able to keep up, Yanez, has kind of not exactly low volume, but, when he's looking to counterpunch, he sometimes will, his output will kind of lower a little bit, just waiting for his opponents to throw, making those reads. So, if it gets extended, it could look it could look a little close, but I do think that overall Yanez should be getting, the better of Grant in some of these exchanges. So I'm going to go with Yanez here. I think he's got a little more pop. I think he's, just going to be younger and quicker in there. So I do think that he will eventually find the chin of Grant. So I'm going to go with Yanez. I think Yanez gets it done either in the second or third round with a knockout. And in the next fight, we have Joanne Calderwood versus Taila Santos, and Santos is the minus 300 favorite come back on. Calderwood is plus 250, and I do want to mention here that Santos is going to be taking this fight on somewhat short notice. I believe it's been about 6 weeks out, so not super short notice, but Calderwood's original opponent was supposed to be Grasso. Grasso pulled out of the fight, and so Santos is stepping in. That said, though, I do think that 6 weeks is a good enough time for her to prepare for this fight. But, taking a look at Calderwood here first. She is primarily a striker here. She's very high output, constantly working, constantly throwing. She's not the most powerful hitter, but, she is someone who does have a very high work rate, is someone who likes to mix in the kicks as well. Just a very nice, diverse striking game. She's got a bit of wrestling as well. But, she is generally someone who will look to keep it standing, but can definitely mix in the wrestling to, close out rounds or to just look to score on the card. So, she's a decent fighter for sure. Is someone who is got good fight IQ. She knows what, she has to do to win in there. So overall, I do think that Calderwood's a pretty solid fighter, but I do feel we've kind of seen the best of her. We know, what she brings to the table. And at this point in her career, I don't think that she's really getting any better. And she'll be going up against Santos. So, Calderwood's definitely going to have her work cut out for her. Santos, looking like a pretty hyped prospect at this point. Santos, I think we all kind of know the story with her. She makes her UFC debut, drops the ball against Mara Barella Romero. A fight that I think, if they run it back, that Santos should win pretty handily, but she kind of just dropped the ball there. But she since then has rebounded pretty strongly. Was able to pretty much dominate all of her most recent opponents. Molly McCann, Jillian Robertson, Roxanne Modafferi. Not the best wins, and definitely a step up in competition in Calderwood. But I do feel that Santos, she's got a really good skill set in there. She's, I think, a pretty good athlete as well. She's very, I think, physically strong. She's got a good striking game, but recently she's shown that she could grapple as well. I do actually think that Santos has got pretty good striking, but she hasn't really been able to show it. So that said, I do feel the grappling and the wrestling is going to be the path to victory here for Santos. With Calderwood, she might be the fighter that can bring a little more volume, bring a little more action on the feet, more diverse striking overall. But, historically, the fights that Calderwood has struggled in were the fights that she's taken down in, and all the fights that she's lost, she's either been taken down and submitted or just taken down and controlled. So taking a look at some of Calderwood's losses real quickly, her most recent loss to Lauren Murphy, a fight she arguably could have won, maybe should have won. And, Murphy definitely may have just weaseled a decision there, but, Murphy did have pretty extended success in the grappling, which, may have been what stole her that fight. And then Cynthia Calvillo was able to take Calderwood down repeatedly, get a bit of control time, and then win that fight as well. Andrade was able to get Calderwood down, submit her. And, even Jennifer Maia, right? She didn't hit the takedown on Calderwood, but Calderwood definitely showed a pretty suspect fight IQ there, took the fight to the ground, and then got submitted there. And then Calderwood also got submitted by Moroz way back in the day. But basically what I'm trying to say here is that I do think that Calderwood's kind of weak on the ground. She has been controlled there, and she has definitely, shown pretty weak submission defense, I'd say. And, with Santos, I do think Santos is going to be the more athletic fighter in there, probably the stronger fighter. And Santos has shown she could go to the grappling, the wrestling for extended periods of time. She was able to do that against McCann, against Robertson, against Modafferi. All fighters who, technically lower on the totem pole compared to Calderwood. But as far as, defensive grappling goes, I do think they're probably along around the same level. So, on the feet, I do think that Calderwood can have some success. She can probably, just look to touch Santos. But overall, I do think that if Santos is able to get her hands on Calderwood here, I think that Santos could get a ton of control time, can rack up some damage on top as well. So I think Santos wins there. I feel that maybe the line might be a little wide, but, at the end of the day, I do think that Santos, is a pretty tough stylistic matchup here for Calderwood. Calderwood definitely does have the experience advantage here, but I really don't think that Calderwood is that good of a fighter. She kind of, I don't want to say lucked into it, but, she got kind of fortunate with her, most recent run before running into Jennifer Maia. So, Calderwood, decent fighter, but I do think that Santos is, she's looking legit. So, I don't want to ride the hype train just yet, but I do feel that stylistically, this is a pretty tough matchup here for Calderwood. So I do think Santos should be able to grind out a decision victory here. But, I'm not going to rule out the submission. I do think that if Santos is able to get a good amount of top time on Calderwood, she could do a bit of damage, possibly get a submission, maybe get a TKO. But I do think that, if she starts doing a bit of damage onto Calderwood, Calderwood might just give her back or something. So I'm going to go with Santos here. I'm going to take her to win via decision, but I do think the submission is live, potentially. And in the next fight, we have Qileng versus Hani Yahya. Yahya's the -144 favorite. Comeback on Qileng is +124. And this is actually a pretty interesting matchup between two grapplers. Pretty much a grappler versus grappler matchup. Usually, it's kind of hard to predict how these fights will go because sometimes they'll maybe just keep it standing because, both guys don't want to engage in the grappling with the other, or maybe one guy will try to get his grappling going. It's a little 50-50 in that regards. But as far as this matchup goes, I feel that Qileng is probably the better wrestler, but, I don't think by a wide margin. And, as far as maybe their submissions go, I think that, Yahya is probably the better submission grappler. But overall, I just feel both guys are pretty high level with their grappling. On the feet, though, I favor Qileng a little bit more. He's a little tighter on the feet. He pumps the jab out pretty well. Will look to work the kicks as well. However, his striking is honestly pretty limited. Not super layered. Nothing super high level, honestly, just really basic, very just fundamental. He honestly has the most success when he's able to get his grappling going. On the feet, he's really just looking to pump the jab out, work the kick, and, it's not going to win him fights. It's really his wrestling, his grappling is really what wins him his fights, honestly. As far as his grappling goes, he does have pretty solid timing on his level change. He does have a good reactive double. On the top, he is pretty heavy. He will look for submissions, but, he will prioritize, control time, looking to really just smother opponents if he isn't able to find the submission. He will work some ground and pound, but, isn't super active with it. Again, the guy is just, prioritizing control. The guy can definitely be a bit of a wet blanket on top. Meanwhile, his opponent, Yahya, on the feet is a little wild. The guy does like to look to close the distance, swinging some of those wild overhands. And, like I said before with some of these, high-level submission guys, they're not afraid of getting taken down. So they get a little wild in there. And Yahya could definitely hurt you if he lands one of those, heavy overhands. Yeah, the guy is actually kind of explosive in there. But, outside of that, he doesn't really have too much to offer on the feet. And again, the guy is primarily a grappler. On the feet, or on the ground, he's got, really good scrambling, good transitions, and is, pretty aggressive with the sub. I think that, the difference with him and Qileng is that he will maybe overextend a bit, trying to hunt the sub and could potentially get reversed. Whereas with Qileng, the guy is, again, prioritizes the control much more and, tends to stay safe. Whereas Yahya, he's a bit more aggressive on top. And secondly, Yahya does appear to be the fighter that's a little more comfortable off his back. And I feel that might work to his disadvantage this fight, especially against Qileng, who, he is pretty heavy on top. And, if both guys are pretty high level with their jiu-jitsu, I do think that the guy on top is going to be able to stay safe and, definitely get a lot more control time and definitely win on the cards that way. So for this matchup, I am going to have to favor Qileng a bit more just because, well, for a number of reasons, actually. So on the feet, I think it's going to be pretty even, honestly. Yahya, he'll have the more, he'll probably be landing the bigger shots. He's a lot more explosive. Will probably have a bit more power in there. But, I do see Qileng on the feet, fighting a more measured fight. Just pumping the jab out, just working the kicks. He will have the size advantage, so I do think that, he could probably stay a bit safer at distance. But I do expect Yahya to crash the distance there, and I think the fight will eventually get to the ground. And on the ground, I do have to lean towards Qileng here, just because, like I've said multiple times before for this breakdown, I believe that Qileng is the better positional grappler. He's going to be he's gonna be the one in the dominant position, I think, for the majority of the fight. I'm not saying Yahya won't have any success with the grappling. I just feel that Qileng will probably be able to take advantage of Yahya's willingness to play off his back and just get a good amount of control time. And I feel that Qileng is high enough level on the ground to, defend the submission attempts. Secondly, I do favor the youth of Qileng by a little bit more. I mean, he's not much younger than Yahya, but I think it's young enough to the point I think that it will be making a bit of a difference. Because I think about a year ago, Yahya was fighting Barzola in what was a pretty high-paced grappling match. And, he did have a good amount of success the first 2 rounds, but the guy was just dead tired by the 3rd round. And I definitely don't think his cardio is getting any better. And if this is going to be another grappling match, I do expect Qileng to potentially have the better cardio here. And, if Yahya tires out like he did against Barzola, Qileng will likely win that 3rd round. It'll really come down to the first 2 rounds. But I feel that if Qileng is, if he's the one on top, he's just going to be, draining the gas tank of Yahya even quicker. So for that reason, I am going to side with Qileng here. I haven't placed a bet on him yet, but at minus 144, I don't think he's a bad bet. I might look to maybe just play him by decision also, because I don't think that Qileng will be submitting Yahya. And unless Yahya just gets absolutely just gassed in there, I don't think he's going to be able to get the finish either. I think there's a good chance this fight goes to decision. And if it does, I favor the guy who's going to have more control time in Qileng. So the pick here is Qileng, and I do have him winning by decision. And in the next fight, we have Michael Chiesa versus Sean Brady. And Brady's the minus 141 favorite. Come back on. Chiesa is plus 121. So we'll take a look at the underdog and the veteran in this spot in Chiesa here first. So, Chiesa, he is primarily a grappler. He's very tall and long for the division. Even at 170, I mean, the guy was fucking big at 155. But, even at 170, he is, I'd say, a pretty tall, lanky sort of guy. His striking, I think, is pretty limited. I don't think his striking is bad, though. I actually do think it's decent, but he just doesn't seem all that comfortable there. He is someone who, as soon as he gets the opportunity to, will look to get in on his opponents, either take the fight to the ground or maybe pin them up against the cage and look for a trip there or something. But Chiesa's he's much more comfortable on the ground. He's very fluid there. He's got great transitions. He's heavy on top, and he's very aggressive with the submission attempts as well. And if those don't present themselves, he is fine with just laying on top of his opponents and just grinding them out, maintaining control and just kind of stalling the round out that way. But, against lower level guys without great submission defense, he generally will be able to find the sub. But, if that doesn't happen, he definitely can just kind of accumulate control time and just win a very grindy sort of decision as well. So with Chiesa, he definitely does play to his strengths pretty well there. Historically, the only time Chiesa really struggles is against other really proficient grapplers as well. Most of his losses are via submission. He does have one knockout win, but all of his other losses are via submission. So for as good as Chiesa is offensively, he is liable to get submitted as well. That's definitely something to keep in mind here, because he's going to be going up against Sean Brady, who is, I think, a pretty good submission grappler as well. The only difference is I do think that Brady's definitely not as experienced as Chiesa in there. Chiesa has been in the UFC for as long as Brady's been fighting professionally. So Definitely the experience advantage for Chiesa. He's fought, much higher level of competition as well. So that's definitely in favor of Chiesa. But, I do still think that while Brady might still be a little green in MMA, I do think he's a very strong submission grappler himself. And then on top of that, I do think that Brady's got better boxing too. And, maybe he's not like leagues above Chiesa in the striking department, but I do feel that Brady's definitely a lot more comfortable there. He made his debut against Court McGee, who, definitely a veteran at that time, and he was able to stand and bang in there with them. And even against some of his other opponents, Brady's shown that he is competent on the feet, that, he's not just looking to dive in on the double as soon as possible. Whereas with Chiesa, it doesn't look like Chiesa really likes, getting hit. He's generally looking to get the fight in close, get his grappling going as soon as possible. It's makes his shots a little telegraphed in that sense. And also with Brady, I do feel that he's able to mix and transition into the grappling a lot smoother because he's a lot more comfortable on the feet. So on the feet, I for sure favor Brady a bit more. I think he packs a bit more power. And overall, I just think he's the slicker boxer. And, where it really gets interesting, of course, is going to be the grappling, right? Chiesa, I definitely do have to favor him a bit more, just based on the fact that, he's been in there with some really, really high-level grapplers. He's been in there with RDA, Kevin Lee, Beneil Dariush, Jim Miller, just guys who are very high level. But, I do have to mention, actually, that a lot of these guys he's been able to beat in there were 155ers. And, even RDA, even though that fight was at 170, RDA, I think, has a frame much more suited to 155, and even guys like Lee, who he actually lost to Lee, but guys like Lee and Dariush and Miller, 155ers as well. Whereas with Brady's I think a legit 170 fighter, not the biggest at 170, but he is very thick. He is very well muscled in there, and historically I do feel that Chiesa, when he does struggle, he either struggles against very high level submission artists as well, or guys that have been able to kind of to outbully him in there. We saw that a bit with Kevin Lee and most recently Luque as well. That said, though, I definitely do have to give Chiesa props in that fight because it looked like he had Luque in a pretty compromising situation early in that fight. Looked like he had a pretty nasty neck crank, but Luque is a very high level on the ground as well. So he was able to reverse positions on him and get the sub himself. So, not a terrible look for Chiesa. I think it just really speaks to how good Luque is. But, I do feel that the submission defense of Chiesa is really, I don't think it's bad, but, against a good submission grappler, I do think that they will be able to find holes in there, even against a very high-level grappler like Chiesa. So for that reason, I definitely am leaning the Sean Brady side in this matchup here. Like I said before, I do favor Brady on the feet. So if Brady does want to keep this fight standing, I do think that he'll have a bit of an advantage. I think he's probably got the quicker hands in there. He's got better combination striking. I think he's the heavier hitter. So overall, in the striking exchanges, I do favor Brady. And then, when it comes to the grappling, I think, Chiesa definitely is live for the submission. He's very aggressive there. He's very crafty there, and very, experienced there. So that definitely is a live outcome. But, we have seen that Chiesa, he will struggle a little bit, finding the sub against very high level guys with good submission defense. I guess Neil Magny, RDA, guys he isn't able to sub, but, is able to get a bit of top control time on and just kind of grind his way to a decision here. So if Chiesa isn't able to get the submission here, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to hold Brady down. I don't know if he's going to be able to have as much grappling success against Brady as he did against some of these other guys. So for those reasons, I'm going to have to side with Brady here. I can definitely see the value side being Chiesa here, being the much more proven veteran. The fact that this is going to be the biggest step up in competition for Brady. I can definitely see me, taking the dog shot on Chiesa here, but I do feel that if Chiesa isn't able to find the submission, he will probably struggle a bit in this matchup. And, who's to say Brady won't be able to hit takedowns of his own, get a bit of top control time and, muscle his way to a submission as well, similar to how Kevin Lee did it. But, obviously Brady probably not as high level as Lee in that spot. But, I do think that Brady's a very talented prospect. I do think that he's got a bright future. So I do think Brady's got the potential to do it. I don't know if I want to lay the juice on it just yet. I mean, minus 141. If Brady is the real deal, this is probably, the best price we'll get on him in a while. But yeah, I like Brady in the spot. I don't know if I'll be betting him. I would like to see, how he does in this matchup. But, if he does well, he's going to be pretty heavily juiced going forward. So I like Brady in the spot. I think he could possibly keep it standing and, box his way to a decision, or maybe hit takedowns, either, get a bit of control time and win that way, or maybe even find the submission. So I kind of like Brady in the spot, even though he is a little unproven, but I do think he's the real deal. And in the main event, we have Vieira versus Miesha Tate, and Tate's the minus 125 favorite. Comeback on Vieira is plus 105. And we'll take a look at Tate first. So, this is going to be Tate's second fight back after that long layoff. And, she's actually coming off of a pretty dominant performance against Renault, which is pretty good to see after such a long layoff. But as far as what Tate does well, she is primarily a grappler, or, that's where she does her best work. But, as far as her striking, I've always felt, it's always been a little clunky, a bit subpar compared to the rest of the division. But, like I said before, she does do her best work when the fight is on the ground, when she's on top of her opponents, or when she's just in a control position. She's got decent wrestling, and, if she isn't able to take opponents down, I have seen her just look to hold opponents up against the cage, really just accumulate that control time. And when she's on top of opponents, she does stay pretty active with the ground and pound, and, may look for submissions as well. But, I do think she's a pretty decent control grappler. And there were definitely a ton of question marks about her coming into the Renault fight, how she was going to look after such a long layoff. And overall, she looked really good, but we do have to consider the fact that, it was a 44-year-old Renault, a Renault who had a foot out the door, essentially, a Renault who was also on a 4-fight lose streak and has retired since then. So, while Tate did have a pretty good performance there, I don't know if you want to put too much stock into it. But at the end of the day, it was a solid win. A win's a win, and she looked good in it. Wasn't in too much trouble that fight. And, Renault was just a good fight to really come back to for her, really get her feet under her, I guess, really get up to speed. And, I think it's much better that Tate was able to get that, tune-up fight in Renault, as opposed to jumping straight into the fire against someone like Vieira, who is a pretty solid fighter, one who I don't think is maybe elite anywhere, but, she does have a pretty well-rounded game. She's got decent striking, can definitely mix in the wrestling a bit, and does seem to have pretty solid jiu-jitsu as well. So I do think that Vieira is a pretty well-rounded fighter. She's in the prime of her career. She's very physically big as well. So this is going to be a pretty decent matchup here for Tate coming into her second fight since her layoff. But going back to Vieira real quick, like I said about her, very well-rounded, but not really elite anywhere. She is generally kind of low volume on the feet. She is someone who I do think does her best work or has the most success when she's able to incorporate her grappling as well. I don't think that Vieira's got, fantastic hands or anything, but usually when she is able to mix in some of the wrestling, get a bit of control time, she is able to do really well on the scorecards. But taking a look at this matchup, I definitely think I do favor Vieira on the feet by a bit. I don't think she's going to be blowing Tate out of the water or anything. I really don't think that Vieira is that good of a striker. But, on the other hand, I've never thought that Tate was a good striker either. I don't think she hits particularly hard. She's a bit hittable. She's a bit clunky on the feet. So I do think that Vieira, being the slightly bigger, taller fighter in there, I do think that Vieira's probably going to have a little more success. I do think that Vieira is a little more comfortable on the feet as well. But when it comes to the grappling, I do favor Tate a little bit more. I think that she's definitely the more active grappler. She's a little more experienced in there. She's gone 5 rounds. She's been up against some of the better fighters in the division, albeit, it was a few years ago. And similar to the discrepancy in the striking, I don't think it's going to be a massive gap when it comes to the grappling. But, I wouldn't be completely surprised if Tate was able to have a bit of control time on Vieira, but I do think that Vieira might be able to have some success with the grappling as well. So I do feel that it might be somewhat even with a slight edge going to Tate there. But With that being said, I do have to say that Vieira's performance against Kunitskaya was a little troubling. Kunitskaya, I don't think, is a phenomenal grappler, and she was able to hold Vieira up against the cage, was able to take her down, have a bit of success in that second round, and also reverse Vieira late in that third round to steal the round and the fight as well. So that was a very troubling performance for me on Vieira's part. I do think that, if someone like Kunitskaya is able to have that much wrestling success, that much grappling success against Vieira, I do think that Tate can have similar success doing the same thing. That said, though, Tate, she is 35, and, she had a good performance against a 44-year-old Renault, but, I don't know how well that's going to translate to someone like Vieira, who is much closer to her prime. But again, seeing that Kunitskaya performance was very troubling and, gives me little confidence in Vieira in this spot. And I really hate to just base this prediction off of just that one performance, but, that's really all I have to go with. I really don't think that Vieira's really fought that many grapplers, or even high-level grapplers for that matter. So I have to side with Tate here. I do think that over the course of 5 rounds, she could definitely get a bit of control time, maybe win at least 3 of those rounds. As for Vieira, though, she could definitely hit some control time as well, maybe keep the fight standing and do a bit of damage on the feet. But again, I don't think I don't think the striking's really that lopsided, so I don't think she's going to be blowing Tate out of the water. And I do think that if Tate is able to get her grappling going, she could win rounds pretty easily. And, I do also have to say, even if Tate is able to get or even if Vieira is able to get Tate down, I do think that Tate might be able to reverse Vieira and put herself in a better position. So I'm going to go with Tate here. I'm not super confident about this because, again, we've only seen one good performance from Tate coming back, and it was against a very old Renault who, was on her way out. So, again, not the most confidence, but at the end of the day, Tate, she is a very high-level fighter in there. She's been in there with some of the best fighters. She's gone 5 rounds before. And, Vieira, while she does have a solid skill set, hasn't really beaten, I think, anyone of note. So I'll have to go with Tate here. Sorry. I'll go with Tate here to win via decision.